To know a little bit about the guy that replaced President Kennedy. Okay, so we'll start with this. Okay, Lyndon Baines Johnson was born on August 27th, 1908 in a farmhouse near Stonewall, Texas. Okay, Lyndon Baines Johnson, B-A-I-N-E-S. Lyndon Baines Johnson was born on August 27th, 1908 in a farmhouse near Stonewall, Texas. And he was the oldest of 5 children. He had 1 brother and 3 sisters. So Lyndon Johnson is born on August 27th, 1908 in a farmhouse near Stonewall, Texas. He was the oldest of 5 children. He had 1 brother and 3 sisters. Now, at the age of 5, his family moved to nearby Johnson City, which was founded by his grandfather. So when he was 5 years old, his family moved to nearby Johnson City, which was a town that was founded by his grandfather. Well, he grew up in Johnson City, went to school in Johnson City, and in 1924 he graduated from high school at the age of 16. So in 1924, after attending elementary and high schools in Johnson City, he graduates from high school in 1924 at the age of 16. And his parents, which was a little bit unusual at this time, what did they urge him to do? Go to college. And he didn't want to do that. He was not interested in going to college. So he traveled to California with some of his buddies to earn some money. But after no success in earning any money with his buddies, he went back to Johnson City. So, they fizzled in a couple projects. I think it was just more go out and have a little bit of fun and didn't really get anything done. Kind of reminded me of a Keller Rogers deal. He got together with his buddies. So he traveled to California with some friends to earn some money, had no success, returned back to Johnson City, and he found a job shoveling dirt into dump trucks 8 hours a day. So he goes to California with his buddies, can't find any work really that's worthwhile, can't make any money. Comes back to Johnson City, finds a job shoveling dirt into dump trucks 8 hours a day. And after doing that for a while, he went home and said to his parents, quote, "I'm sick of working with my hands. I don't know if I can work with my brain, but I'm ready to try." So he worked, shoveling dump trucks for a while and decided, I think I'm a little bit smarter than this. I think I can use my head more than my back. And so he borrowed $75 from the Johnson City Bank and enrolled at Southwest Texas Teachers College. So after shoveling dirt into dump trucks 8 hours a day until he was sick of it, he decided he would try to work with his brain instead of his back, so to speak. And he went to the bank in Johnson City and borrowed $75 and enrolled in college at Southwest Texas Teachers College. You couldn't even buy a book for $75 today to go to college. So he borrowed $75 from the Johnson City Bank and enrolled in college at Southwest Texas Teachers College. Well, he graduated from there, and what did he get a job doing? Teaching. And he taught public speaking at Sam Houston High School in Houston, Texas, and he coached a very successful debate team. Very successful debate team. So after graduation from college, Johnson taught public speaking at Sam Houston High School in Houston, Texas, even coached a winning debate team. But he only lasted 1 year. Didn't really like teaching, and that's when he decided to enter politics. So after teaching for 1 year, public speaking, at Sam Houston High School in Houston, Texas, and coaching the successful debate team there, he quit his teaching career and decided to enter politics. Now this will be important because I'm going to tell you the sequence in his political career. His first political job was that of a congressional secretary. He was a congressional secretary. Does anybody know what that might be? If you look at it, you'd think it might be Evelyn Lincoln as a presidential secretary. That really wasn't it. A congressional secretary was someone that worked for a certain politician mainly and helped them campaign. And if they got pretty good at helping them, they might give them some other chores within the campaign. Senator Barrasso, when I call him the phone, he's got a lot of congressional secretaries that work for him, male and female, that do different jobs. Well, he decided he would be a congressional secretary, which was a person who campaigned for certain politicians. And the man that he served under was a congressman by the name of Richard Kleberg. Richard Kleberg was the congressman who Lyndon Johnson served as congressional secretary. And he worked with Kleberg from 1932 until 1937. 5 years he worked with Congressman Kleberg as a congressional secretary. And as he got more involved, he basically ran Kleberg's office, because Kleberg was a congressman that was much more interested in kind of the high life of the position than he was really getting anything done. So Lyndon Johnson was really, in a lot of ways, running Kleberg's congressional office, and he was the one kind of getting some things done. Kleberg was kind of interested in going to dinner parties and kind of saying, hey, I'm a congressman, I'm pretty neat. And Johnson did the dirty work, so to speak. Well, on September 12th, people load these dates here. On September 12th of 1934, Johnson met a young lady by the name of Claudia Alta Taylor. On September 12th, 1934, Johnson met a pretty young lady by the name of Claudia Alta Taylor. Now, nobody really knew her as Claudia. They all knew her, family and friends, as Ladybird. She was given the nickname Ladybird when she was just 12 years old. And she went to the doctor one day, and the nurse looked at her, no kidding, this is a true story, and said that that little girl is just as pretty as a ladybird. And the name stuck. And so she wasn't known as Claudia to her friends and family from the time she was 12 years old. They referred to her as Ladybird. Well, they went on their first date. Girls, pay attention here if you want to get a man. Okay? They went on their first date. It's a breakfast date and a long drive in the country. Pay attention. On their first date, which was a breakfast date and then a long drive in the country, after their first date, Lyndon Johnson proposed to her. After their first date. Now, Lady Bird really didn't want to rush into marriage, but she accepted his proposal. 10 weeks later, they were married. 10 weeks later, on November 17, 1934. So, on their first date, which was a breakfast date and a long drive in the country, Johnson proposed, and although Lady Bird did not want to rush into marriage, she accepted his proposal, and 10 weeks later, they were married. So you've already gone like 4 times the limit here. So what?
Do you have any other details, like why?
You know, I'll tell you. From the time I met my wife till the time we got married was 11 months. So you never know.
I mean, one day.
I don't know. You know, I can't explain it. He must have been quite the guy, right? Anyway, she must have been quite the girl. I was waiting for that. So 10 weeks later, they're married. And they marry in San Antonio, Texas. And they end up having 2 daughters. Unfortunately, Mrs. Johnson suffered 3 miscarriages before they had their daughters. So after 3 miscarriages, the couple eventually had 2 daughters. Linda, L-Y-N-D-A, was born in 1944. So after 3 miscarriages, the couple had 2 daughters. The first was Linda, L-Y-N-D-A, who was born in 1944. And the second daughter was Lucy, L-U-C-I, who was born in 1947. So it was not an easy thing for them. Mrs. Johnson had 3 miscarriages, and finally the first daughter, Linda, was born in 1944, and then Lucy followed in 1947. Well, going back, in 1937, Johnson decided that he would run for Congress himself. He had great experience under Richard Kleberg, and he was going to run for Congress himself. And he was going to try to fill the seat of James P. Buchanan, who had died in office. That's why the seat came open. So in 1937, Lyndon Johnson decided he would run for Congress, attempting to fill the seat of James P. Buchanan, who had died in office. Well, what do you have to do if you're gonna run for Congress? Kind of campaign, raise a little money. Well, Lady Bird had received $10,000 in an inheritance from her family, and she gave that money to her husband to campaign on to try to start his political career. She's a good gal, isn't she? 10,000, a lot of money in 1937. So it was from her mother's estate. She had inherited some money from her mother's estate, and she invested, so to speak, her money into her husband's campaign, and it was a successful result. He was successful, and he was elected to replace Buchanan in the House of Representatives from Texas. So that was his first major political position when he was a congressman from Texas, elected to replace James Buchanan, who had died in office. Well, in 1938, Johnson was elected to his own term in the House. In other words, once he filled the term of Buchanan, he ran for his own election and was successful in 1938, and then he was re-elected to a second term in 1940. So let me explain that to you. He didn't get counted a term when he replaced Buchanan. So then he ran for his own election in 1938, and then he was re-elected in 1940, because congressional seats are every 2 years. What's the problem here?
In 1937, $10,000 was $172,400.
There you go. Thank you for that again. How much, I'm glad I have you and your phone out all the time. What was that again?
1937 was $172,451.40.
Thank you very much. Note that. Okay, what do you think he did in 1941 after being re-elected for a second term in the House? Decided he wanted to run for the Senate. So in 1941, he announces that he wants to run for the United States Senate, and ironically, he is also running for another unexpired term, this time of Senator Morris Shepherd, who also died in office. So when he decides to run for the Senate position in 1941, he will again be trying to replace someone that died in office, this time Senator Morris Shepherd. Unfortunately for him, yes?
So you told us to kind of keep these in order, and the first one was the
Politicals.
Congressional Secretary?
And the member of the House.
Okay, and then, so we're on to three now?
Yep, we're going to the Senate, yep. Now, unfortunately though, Taylor, my dear, he did not win this election. And so he finished his term in the House. So he campaigned hard, but he lost this election for the Senate. And what was going on in history about the time he lost this Senate bid? World War II, and the events of Pearl Harbor, December 7th of 1941, resulted in Johnson joining the United States Navy, where he actually earned the Silver Star for gallantry. So events of Pearl Harbor resulted in Johnson joining the United States Navy. In the United States Navy, he earned the Silver Star for bravery during his efforts in World War II. It was a little different then. Yeah. Now, after World War II ended, Johnson and Lady Bird actually purchased a radio station and later added a television station as well. So after he served his time in World War II defending our country, he and his wife purchased a radio station and later added a television station as well, and also invested in real estate. Why are they doing this? What are they going to save their money for, do you think? Another run for the Senate. So they purchased this radio station, added a television station, invested some of their money that they made in real estate, hoping that they could earn enough money for another Senate run. Not cheap to run for the Senate. Okay? Well, in this Senate election, Johnson's going to find his toughest challenge in the primary, which means he's going to have a tougher time defeating his own Democratic rival for the nomination than he is probably to win the general election, because he's taken on a former Texas governor by the name of Coke Stevenson. And Coke Stevenson was a very popular Texas governor, and he had retired from office the year before and decided he would try to run for the Senate as well. So you have two really good candidates running for the Democratic nomination for the Texas Senate at this time. Lyndon Johnson is going to challenge former Texas Governor Coke Stevenson. Now, to be honest with you, whoever wins, it's kind of like sometimes when you get the two best teams in the semifinals of a state tournament, sometimes that's you're going to be, whoever wins that's going to win the state, and that's kind of was with Johnson. Whoever wins this primary campaign between he and Stevenson is going to breeze to victory in the general election. Well, Johnson campaigned hard, and here was the final vote. Now just kind of jot this down for the fun of it. Johnson had 494,191 votes. 494,191. Stevenson had 494,104. 87 votes separated them. 494,104. Johnson won by just 87 votes. And in a Senate election, you don't have to have two-thirds majority, just whoever wins, wins. Well, as a result of his big victory, Lyndon Johnson received the nickname Landslide Lyndon, which he did not appreciate very much, because it was far from a landslide. People that made fun of Johnson for his narrow victory called him Landslide Lyndon. You know who was one of the ones that really teased him more about that than anybody? What? Say it. Yeah, John Kennedy. He just hated Kennedy for that. Okay? So as a result of this election, he defeated Coke Stevenson by 87 votes and received from his rivals the nickname Landslide Lyndon, which stayed with him the rest of his career, which he did not like. Okay, so now he goes to the general election. He doesn't do hardly any campaigning, and he's elected easily to the United States Senate, defeating his Republican opponent 2-1. He outvoted him 2-1. So the battle was in the primary. So despite very little campaigning, Johnson was easily elected to the United States Senate in the general election, defeating his Republican opponent almost 2-1. Then his political career really starts going, because in January of 1953, he's elected Senate Minority Leader. That would be second in command of the Senate. In January of 1953, he was elected Senate Minority Leader. He was only 44 years old. He was the youngest person ever in history to serve in that position at that point. 44 years old, he was elected Senate Minority Leader in January of 53. In January of 55, at the age of 46, he became Senate Majority Leader. The leader of the Senate. Again, he was the youngest in American history to assume the top post in the United States Senate. So he really did well. He gets elected, he's the Senate Minority Leader, youngest in history. 2 years later, he's the Senate Majority Leader, youngest in history. And he was noted during his time as Senate Majority Leader of working very well across the aisle with President Eisenhower. He was very, very non-partisan. He worked very well with President Eisenhower. So as Senate Majority Leader, Johnson worked well with President Dwight D. Eisenhower despite their political party differences. He was a very, very effective Senate Majority Leader. Well, in July of 1955, at the age of 56, he suffered a very severe heart attack. July of 1955, at just 46 years old, he suffered a severe heart attack. And he was treated and recuperated at Bethesda Naval Hospital. He was there for 5 weeks. But I'll tell you what, he continued to work from his hospital bed. This guy was a worker. I mean, this guy got after it. Very big worker. And he continued to work from his hospital bed for 5 weeks at Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. Many of his supporters said that he worked harder than ever after his heart attack, and Johnson was once quoted as saying, quote, "I never think of politics more than 18 hours a day." That's what he said. He was an incredibly hard worker. So he worked harder even after that heart attack. A lot of people would slow down. He did not. and was once quoted as saying, "I never think of politics more than 18 hours a day." Well, we know some of this history, so you can write it down if you want. He had intentions on the presidency, did he not, in 1960? But he lost on the first ballot to the nomination to John Kennedy. Okay, he had ended up being John Kennedy's vice president, and historians will tell you that for two reasons, his experience as vice president was not a positive one for him. So even though he served in the second highest office in the land, historians will tell you that it was not a positive experience for him, and these are the two reasons why. Anybody want to guess one of them? Very good. He was the most powerful man in the Senate. That's right, Mason. So that was a step down, power-wise, to be the vice president. Some people think the vice presidency might be the closest thing to falling off the face of the earth politically, because he gets sent here and there. So he lost a ton of power. What else maybe bothered him a little bit about being vice president? Well, what did he think of John Kennedy's experience? Yeah, he did not like playing what you'd call second fiddle to a less experienced man. That bothered him. He thought he was much more politically experienced, and he was, than John Kennedy. So, two reasons why the vice presidency was pretty miserable for him is he did not enjoy playing second fiddle to a less experienced man, and he lost a ton of power because he was the most powerful man in the Senate. And close friends and colleagues to tell you that his years as vice president were the most miserable years of his life. He hated every minute of it. And of course we know that after the assassination of President Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, Lyndon Johnson became the nation's 36th president. We know that, and that's where we're at today. Now we'll move on to his future a little bit here, and then we'll get into things he did. But President Johnson was elected to his own term in 1964. He finished out Kennedy's term, and I will tell